Today's exploration is of a delightful chapter in the book Synthesis of Yoga, and the chapter is called The Delight of the Divine. It's a beautiful chapter, and usually when we read Sri Aurobindo or when we start reading Sri Aurobindo's texts, one of the first impressions that some of us can draw is that it's very intellectually heavy and it's difficult to understand, and Sri Aurobindo must be an intellectual, and the process of integral yoga also is a very knowledge driven process. But when you get to the depths, you realize that the process of integral yoga or the Sri Aurobindo Mother's yoga is deeply rooted in love, in bhakti, in devotion, and in the delight of the divine. And this is so because in whatever way or form or whatever aspect of the divine we seek, that is what we become. If we seek the divine as some absolute non-existence, then we become that non-existence. We move away from life. And if we seek the divine as some personality, we also get closer and closer to that personality. And that is why we need to orient, because divine, so to say, is Satchidananda. And even though Satchidananda is one, all of us are drawn to one aspect of it more initially. And if we are drawn to the Sat, what is the truth of the divine? What is divine? And that is usually the seeking of Jnana Yoga, and one starts saying, I'm not this, I'm not this, this is not divine. And that absolute silence or peace or nothingness is divine, then it becomes a kind of an exclusive process. This knowledge or Jnana Yoga kind of very easily gets satisfied with this fact that, okay, divine is something which is an absolute peace or nothingness, and all this here is a kind of an illusion or a Maya. That is Sat and this is Maya. Similarly, in Karma Yoga also, very often we talk about a detached action. We are attuning ourselves to the divine will, but usually again we can operate out of a very detached space. I don't care about what is the outcome. And we are operating again out of a sort of an indifference or a detachment at times. But if it is Bhakti Yoga, it cannot satisfy itself without the Ananda or without the blissful joy. And this Ananda or divine delight is the very nature of the divine, whether it is the Sat or it is the Chit or it is Ananda itself, it is the very nature. And out of this delight itself, the manifestation or creation of the divine also emerges. So in a way, this divine delight is, when that is the seeking, it is all embracing. And here this creation does no more remain Maya, it becomes into Leela. It becomes into the divine play. So in a way, this seeking after an absolute divine delight, a complete delight of the divine, becomes a more complete and integral purpose to yoga. To take an example, let's say if we have to climb a mountain, we could have different motives. We could climb because we want to know about the mountain, we want to know the terrain, how does the mountain look like, what is the height of the mountain, and that is one motive to climb the mountain. The second could be we have some work to do at the top of the mountain, and we have to obey or follow our duties or commands, and that's why we are climbing the mountain. And the third is that we love the mountains. We love the views. We love the beauty of the mountains, and then we are climbing the mountain. And I don't think there is any doubt that which one will be the most enjoyable, delightful, and beautiful experience for us. So that's why when we talk about Ananda, the words love and beauty, they come with it, and it becomes an all-embracing process. And at times, even in that, we end up knowing more about the terrain. We even end up doing what needs to be done, and yet it becomes a more delightful experience for us. So that is the initiation to the chapter that Sri Aurobindo offers, that in a way, integral yoga, where the seeking is not just discovering the truth, it is about aligning oneself to the highest truth, and experiencing it in every part of the being. It is not just about the intellect, not just about the heart, not just about the karmendriya, about the vital, physical, everywhere. The experience needs to come. And for that all-embracing experience, one of the key purposes or most fulfilling purposes is to seek the divine delight or the Ananda. And when we start exploring or we start seeking this Ananda, initially, even in Bhakti Yoga, the process can seem very narrow, because usually it starts with some form of worship, or we are drawn towards a particular form or personality of the divine. We start feeling close to that personality. So it seems like the process is playing out in our heart. And one may say that this process is initially narrow. It is not that all-embracing, all-delighting process. But as it purifies itself more and more, it widens. And that is where it eventually can arrive at that scope of being all-embracing. And one of the key challenges or key levels which one needs to transcend in arriving at that divine delight is to transcend the heavenly bliss. Because very often we mistake the heavenly bliss for this Ananda. When we feel light, when we enter a harmonious environment, or what we refer to as an afterlife heaven, where everything is in a state of harmony, there is light, very often we mistake that for Ananda, or we get absorbed by that heavenly bliss. So if one has to truly arrive at that divine delight, then one has to transcend this heavenly bliss, endure this heavenly bliss. One has to be ready to endure not just the hells of life or all the disharmony, conflicts, challenges that life poses us, but also be ready to endure and transcend the heavenly bliss. This point, one of the Sufis by the name Rabbi from Baghdad makes by talking about, he was once walking the streets of Baghdad, and he had a fire in one hand and he had a bucket of water in the other hand, and everybody was wondering why this Sufi is carrying fire and water, what's happened to him. So he talks at this moment that he wants to burn the heaven and he wants to extinguish the fire of the hell in order for everyone to see and experience the true bliss of the divine. So in a way, in order for the divine delight to move from the narrow mold of an intimate connection just in the heart to a more complete and perfect divine delight which is all embracing, one has to transcend the temporary satisfaction that we get in the heavens, or the escapes that we seek from the hell. And that is one when embraces this true divine delight. And the other key aspect is to seek the divine, not just for some heaven or hell, or to embrace some divine quality that I want to be peaceful, I want to be courageous. So very often we approach the divine for these purposes. To initially on the journey, it's pretty materialistic that, okay, please save my family, or I want this much money, or I want this house, or protect me from this legal complication. Those are the reasons which we give, to the reasons becoming more and more refined towards seeking the heaven, and then even further refinement towards seeking to be an ideal human being with ideal qualities. But the true bhakti happens when we seek the divine for the sake of the divine. I do not want anything. I just want thee, for the sake of thee. And that is when that the deeper and the higher movement starts to happen within the being. And this point Sri Aurobindo emphasizes through these lines. He says, it embraces the delight of the transcendence, not for the sake of transcendence, but because he is the transcendent. So one is not seeking transcendence for the sake of transcendence, that okay, that is the space where it's like a heavenly bliss. It seeks transcendence because he is the transcendent. It seeks transcendence because the divine is transcendent. So it is for the sake of the divine. It seeks the delight of the universal, not for the sake of universality, but because he is universal. So it seeks the delight of universality, not because when we feel universal, we feel expanded, we feel happier, but because the divine itself is a universal being. And it seeks not for the sake, he seeks the individual not for the sake of individual satisfaction, but because he is the individual. So very often when we seek the divine within our hearts, then at the point of there is a certain embrace, a certain joy that we experience, and how easy it is to stop at that when we feel a certain quenching of a thirst or an individual satisfaction. But if the seeking is for the sake of the divine individual or divine personality present within everyone and in every particle, the individualistic aspect of the divine, then it becomes an endless flow of that delight. It doesn't remain satisfied with a little bit of a taste of Ananda. And that is where the process widens and it becomes more and more complete and perfect. Because when we transcend those heavens and we experience that true delight, it is not something that we are just experiencing in the transcendence, it is immediately experienced in the heart as well. It's like a mother loving her child. She's not loving the child because the child is intelligent or knows things or the child is obeying the mother, The mother loves the child for the sake of the child, or for the sake of the love and delight bubbling in her for the child. So, the same way, the mother doesn't have to go out there to experience that Ananda. Same way, when we experience that true divine delight, it is an immediate experience in the transcendence and also within the chambers of the heart. So then you don't have to go out searching for heaven elsewhere. The heaven is not naturally present in the heart. And then that heaven doesn't have to be limited just to our own individual mold. It can also be mirrored in everyone around us and in every phenomena in the universe, in a leaf, in the wet soil of the monsoon, in everything around us. And this we see happening. Let's say somebody finds a new love, then they start seeing the world in a different fashion altogether. The life suddenly starts seeming very rosy for a while, until there are limits to human love, and then the phase eventually ends. But that's the beauty of the divine universal love. When it touches a person, then it becomes more of an eternal Ananda, or an eternal delight. So this makes this process, and this also makes that seeking of the delight more aligned with integral yoga. It makes it more complete, it makes it more perfect. And this completeness and perfection Sri Aurobindo describes through these lines: a perfect and complete delight in the divine. Perfect because it is pure and self-existent. It is pure and self-existent means it doesn't need something else in order to experience that delight. It doesn't need an ice cream, it doesn't need a thing which has to be possessed. When there is this, when one touches this delight, or let's say when this delight touches us or possesses us, then it is pure and self-existent within itself. It is complete because it is all-embracing as well as all-absorbing. And this is the meaning of way of bhakti for the seeker of integral yoga. So it is complete because it is not limited to the individual, it is not limited to the transcendent, it is not limited to the universal. It embraces everything and everyone. And when that happens, then naturally the karma yoga and jnana yoga also naturally start flowing from it. Just to give a bit of context, in a way, the journey on bhakti yoga starts from a very external or a very divided part, where jnana yoga or karma yoga or bhakti yoga seem very separate from each other. And it starts with murti puja or worship of something, needing or seeking some personal gain. And then it gets deeper towards an inner adoration. One develops a relationship with some divine personality and feels close to that personality as a divine father or a divine mother or a friend. And then gradually it deepens further towards a relationship of this lover and beloved. And in this relationship, the personal gains start to disappear. And as it purifies more and more, as it widens more and more, that is when the completeness and the perfection in the delight starts to come. And that is where the streams of jnana yoga and karma yoga also start to merge, because the nature of Satchidananda is Ananda, it is delight. So the truth can pour itself, the truth can be understood in the Ananda, the truth of the transcendent can be understood in the transcendent delight. the truth of the universe can be understood in the universal delight. And the truth of the individual can be understood in the individual delight or an individual relationship with the divine. So, in a way, Jnana Yoga will naturally come when there is this delight. The only thing is the point of vigilance, because when it comes to Ananda, and as it starts to flow, there is also a possibility of descending down into getting attached to the heavenly bliss. It brings with it a certain sense of harmony. It brings with it a certain sense of comfort. And there is a possibility of descending down into tamas. And this is where the vigilance comes in, that we again do not get attached to anything, and we do not get attached to again seeking this divine delight for the sake of something. It has to be for the sake of divine, we seek the divine delight. So this vigilance has to come in, and if that is there, then there is a natural flow of this Ananda. Karma Yoga also naturally flows because in a way the karma or the manifestation of this universe is also a pouring of this delight. The Sat exists out of delight. The Sat pours itself into Chit or Chitta Shakti, which is the consciousness force, again for the delight or out of delight. And this Chitta Shakti comes into manifestation again out of delight, not necessity. It's not like I must create this world, I must do this. There's no necessity. It is a pouring of Ananda. So when we are aligned with this Ananda, there is a natural outpouring of action through us. If we have to look at it more practically, because arriving at that complete and perfect supreme delight is something which will be a work in progress for all of us. But if we have to practically see how out of love Karma Yoga can flow, when we tell ourselves that I accept myself and I love myself unconditionally, usually what's happening is our action is flowing from a space of either desires or meeting the expectations of others or meeting our own goals and ideals. But if we set that aside and we say that I accept and love myself the way I am, as is in this moment, and we get in touch with what is it that would express this love, what is it that would make me truly happy, and this happiness goes beyond the intellectual preferences that we may have, or again the desires. So then we see that the action that flows through us, there is a certain spontaneity to it, and there is a certain delight in that action. And in the same way, from above, there is this natural, spontaneous flow of action. And this is an important point for us to differentiate between the Ananda and the desires and pleasure. Because very often pleasure, once we talked about the bliss of the heaven and Ananda being mixed up, we may also mix up pleasure in the senses with the Ananda or satisfaction of the desires. There's a beautiful line by Mother that the delight of conquering a desire is much more than the joy of satisfying a desire. So when we conquer, so when we are talking about this process of purification or widening of this delight, it has to go through the process of, in a way, conquering. And conquering is not suppressing desires. Conquering is power with the desires, transforming them. So when we conquer one desire, the the delight in that is much more than the satisfaction of satisfying that desire. Because pleasure, which comes from satisfying the desire, is in a way a very fleeting phenomena. And Mother again defines pleasure as a distortion of the Ananda, and pain as a sort of opposite of the Ananda. There are three things we may experience in the senses. It can be pleasure, it can be pain, and it can be indifference. Of course, Ananda is also, delight is also experienced in the senses, and it is always there behind all three of them. The pain seems to be the opposite of Ananda. Pleasure is a narrow, distorted version of Ananda, and indifference is like a cloud, or we feel covered. And how often in the process of Jnana Yoga or Karma Yoga we can at times feel indifferent or aloof. And in a way, by doing that, we are ourselves covering ourselves from the delight of the divine. So one has to be vigilant of that. So in a way, when we ask ourselves, what would truly make me happy? And we are willing to love and accept ourselves as is in the present moment, the Karma Yoga flows from the space of love. And when it comes to the complete and perfect delight, from where there is a natural outpouring of the action, perfection also naturally comes in action, because gradually it flowers our being, it expands the mind, it expands the senses, it expands our life and the physical. So there is a natural perfection also comes, and yet there is also a complete acceptance of the imperfections. There is no sorrow on imperfections, because one is seeing the whole manifestation as a divine play. So at the same time, one is also experiencing the delight in whatever that is happening as a part of the divine play. So there is this progressive perfection which is flowing through us, yet there is an acceptance of imperfections. And this is the kind of ideal we set for ourselves, which naturally happens when we are not seeking this idealness, when we are not seeking this heavenly bliss, but we are truly seeking the divine for the sake of the divine. So this is in a way, how the three systems of yoga converge and become integral when the seeking is after a complete and a perfect delight. Lastly, just a point of bringing in science into this understanding, that me being a doctor, I love to talk about how science combines with it. And we have two kinds of, because this has been an exploration for science, what is meditation, what is spirituality. And there are two kinds of tools which have evolved in medical science to measure this spiritual seeking. And one of the ways is the EEG. And they've been showing that when a person goes into meditation, then the brain gets from a very restless beta waves, it goes to alpha, theta and delta, and the mind gets very, very silent and peaceful. So that is one parameter based on which they are able to gauge and measure the spiritual capacities of a person. The second, which has beautifully evolved, is heart rate variability, which measures the variability in the heart rate. And it's not measuring the heart rate, it's measuring the heart rate variability, and how smoothly the heart rate varies, in a way gives a very good gauge to the coherence of an individual. So they found that how incoherent or coherent the person is. Coherence refers to, again, what Sri Aurobindo talks about, that incoherence can be your mind and intellect is going in one direction, the vital in another direction, heart wants something else, senses are wanting something else. So it's an incoherent being with conflicts. Coherence is when everything is aligned. And the way to measure that goes through the heart again. You cannot measure it in the EEG, you can measure it in the ECG, and you can measure it in the pulse of a person. The more smooth it is, the more coherent it is, the more coherent the person is, the more united or one the person is. And some of the simple techniques that they've been able to narrow it down to, which help a person come to this coherence, is to just breathe deeply and just feel the compassion of whoever they love in their heart, and then radiate that love to everyone across. Now these techniques again stem from India, and many such yogis have given such simple techniques, and these are very preliminary methods, but something as simple is yet so profound, in the sense that it brings our whole being into coherence, and it makes yoga integral, is something now which is measurable, or has been measurable now for decades. And Sri Aurobindo ends this chapter with these lines, that when universal love has seized on his heart, it is the decisive sign that the divine has taken possession of him. And when he has the vision of the all beautiful everywhere, and can feel at all times the bliss of his embrace, that is the decisive sign that he has taken possession of the divine.